Prashanth, thank you so much for joining today. You know, I don't have to say, but the tech startup and the developer community love Stack Overflow. And what we want to hear from you today is that, how has the company made such a phenomenal journey by being such a loved product? What does it take? What has gone behind to make Stack Overflow what it is today?
Yeah, great question, Shradha. Thanks for having me today. Happy to kind of share what makes Stack Overflow so special and that creates such a massive impact around the world. So it all started back in 2008 with our two founders that created this community, and which is at the heart of our company, right? We wouldn't be where we are today if it weren't for the community that has sort of almost with the DNA of really wanting to democratize access to information on all things technology, every possible software programming language to, cloud technologies, to web frameworks, you name it. Ultimately the community has built this capability of this public platform with about 15 million questions and answers over a 12-year period. And why that's been able to be so successful is because of the just the logic and the algorithm and the gamification that our founders, along with members of our community, like our Meta users and our Power users of the first, in the early days, created this phenomenal system that has persisted over 12 years. And this includes things like upvotes and downvotes and badges and recognition for people's contributions. And people were able to sort of really come out and help their fellow developers from around the world. So the impact that they're making is very gratifying to each one of us in some ways. And also they are able to sort of be recognized as the world's best Python developer or the world's best JavaScript developer and so on. So that is really, I would say, the heart of why it has been so so persistent and so successful in terms of the network effects and the virtuous cycles that has sort of that is enabled. And so it comes down to those points.
Building the community and getting the community to stay together. Now, if you can tell us, because many people start, and I was reading that you started in 2008, but not everyone becomes one of the most visited sites in the world. What all has gone into it?
Yeah, so I think, so when we think about most companies, they have a very specific journey. But startups, let's take startups in general, right? Most companies, when they start, they focus on building a great product based on a customer problem, and that's where they start. And then they move on to creating a great brand that, maybe as a result of them solving certain problems, they get known for doing, having a great product, they create a great brand. And then third, if they are persistent, they actually go focus on building a community around that, a community of users, right?
Yeah.
And Stack Overflow, what we have done is literally the opposite. We started with building a community, and that's where it all started. And secondly, as a result of that community and the viral adoption in sort of the millions, because we have, as you've probably read, close to 100 million monthly visitors today.
Yeah.
Right from around the world, close to 200,000 monthly signups from around the world. And that has risen over the past, 12 years. That's kind of gotten to that point. It's still rising. That's about the numbers I just shared with you, especially the sign up numbers, 15, 20% higher than 2019 on a monthly basis, as an example. So that community element of really creating a platform and a sort of this foundation where people can share knowledge with virtual cycles was the first step that we created. Then that allows us to enable the brand or recognition of the brand, because everybody knows Stack Overflow, to your point, right? It's well loved as a result of the fact that there are no, the information is free, it's accessible, every possible part of their, if they're having issues pushing code into production in a CI/CD pipeline, they're going to Stack Overflow. So 85% of the world's developers go to Stack Overflow on a weekly basis. And so it's just become a core part of people's workflow on a daily basis that brand now has sort of expanded. It's like the way to write software programs, right? So our applications. And then third, we are now actually on our product journey. So I joined the company in late 2019 as a new CEO, and I was brought on board primarily to say, okay, now let's go create, a long-term sort of sustainable recurring revenue SaaS business that's an extension of this free public platform that we just sort of provided. So that's the journey that we've been on, which is literally the opposite of what most companies typically undergo. And we believe that you'll see more and more companies go this way, because creating, and this is not necessarily a new concept, because you have companies like MongoDB and other open source companies that have done have kind of gone through a similar journey. But I do believe, because of the power of the community and open source, is you're going to see more of this in the future.
I want to understand how important is India market? Because we have so many amazing, talented, young population of developers and techies. So how important is this market for you?
I mean, of course, the personal connection is huge, because I grew up in India, in Bangalore specifically, for 17 years before I came to the States on a scholarship to go to college. So I have a special special place in my heart for India just in general, along with my folks. My parents still live in Bangalore, so I have very deep roots. But as it beyond the personal connection, India is a amazing ecosystem. Right. And it's very hard to, if you think about the startup ecosystems that exist, you've got Silicon Valley, which is like the default ecosystem. Now that's being sort of questioned as a result of what's happened this past year, which is sort of, it's become, can you actually create startups anywhere now? The answer is generally yes, but there's something to be said about the ecosystem that exists in Silicon Valley. That's just, it's not replicable in a very easy way. Right. And then similarly, there's, ecosystems in China, as we know. And then, of course, Bangalore and India specifically, is a phenomenal ecosystem. When I come there every so often to see my folks, and it's just amazing to see the startup ecosystem really sort of take off, and the number of, unicorns being created on a weekly basis, as our partners TimesBridge, showcase for us is fantastic. So people are creating a lot of value, making an impact locally, and the broad young population, that are sort of rising into this next phase of contributing to the economy is just so inspiring. So there is no doubt that as a fundamental economy, India is going to be a huge, huge part of the world's economy going forward. There's no question, right? And then last point I'd mention is that our Stack Overflow user base. So we see, like I mentioned, 100 million monthly visitors. The place where that population comes from on the number one and number two slots. Number one is the US. Number two is India in terms of the number of people that come to our websites. So this gives you a sense that absolutely it's a core part of our what we do, who we serve. We serve the second largest number of people we serve are from India. And then secondly, and lastly, I would say that we just launched a partnership with TimesBridge in Q4 of 2020, in December of 2020, to really take our SaaS product and start really having a go-to-market motion locally into all Indian startups and enterprises, so they can leverage this for their asynchronous collaboration needs. And that's been going well. And we just, we've just kicked off that, and the TimesBridge team has been great to partner with.
I have to ask you this question: if we could get a glimpse of your playbook as the CEO, who's come on board, what are some of your priorities?
Yeah, got it. So I think, it's a fairly straightforward plan from our standpoint. Obviously, execution comes down to execution. Strategy is, everybody has a strategy, right? So I'll explain what we're doing. So we're basically, as a company, at a high level, what we're trying to do is to transform into a high growth, product-led SaaS company or software as a service company, with the foundation that we have, all the things we've already talked about. So that's the goal, right? And that's a multi-year journey, and there's a lot that goes behind that. This year, we have, for 2021, every year we do a planning cycle, and we have strategic planning. We set our priorities for the year, et cetera. And so this year, we have two strategic priorities. One is to go through a product-led transformation. This is what I was describing before, the third pillar of the three: community, brand, product. And what that means is really to enable our SaaS product to be exceptional in terms of the experience for users. So how do they get easy access to the product? How do they get encouraged to use the product? How does it solve their problems? How does it nudge people to do certain things when they have an opportunity to contribute? And how does it solve, the ecosystem of communities that are being built within companies? And that's what we serve, right? That's what we do. So that's one priority, product-led transformation. The other one is predictable and reliable financial performance, which is all about really now going into creating a sustainable business model that we can predict, that going into a quarter or going into a year, we should be able to tell that, these are the number of companies that are interested, the pipeline. How much are we spending? How much are we getting? Like just being sort of thoughtful about that with a very sort of operational sort of mindset, and really being able to predict an outcome in the spirit of becoming, a much more, well-oiled sort of company. And those are the two priorities. And then foundationally, there are three foundations underneath that. Number one is community, and that's at the center of what we do. And that's community health and growth is very, very important to us, as we've already talked about. And then Stacker, as we call our employees, Stackers, Stacker growth and development. So making sure that we really take care of our people, especially given what's happening in the world these days, which is heartbreaking, and to make sure they feel well supported and really trusted to do their jobs, and really to give them the space. And from a cultural standpoint, it's very important to me. And then the last foundation is all around operational scale and reliability. So as we get bigger and bigger, as we add and we're hiring a lot of people, it's very important for us to make sure that we are well set up as an organization as we put in the infrastructure to keep going and going forward and becoming bigger. So those are, two priorities and three foundations, all in the spirit of becoming this high growth, product-led SaaS company.
Now what you're saying is that you are not just productizing, but building it into a SaaS.
Yeah, and one other point to mention, Shradha, is it may be worthwhile to mention is that, like you said, the scale is so large, the 100 million monthly visitors. And as part of our product-led journey, what we're doing, we just launched this about a month ago, was to take our SaaS product, which is Stack Overflow for Teams, which is a private version, in a very sort of simplified way, a private version of our public platform, the Q&A platform that everybody uses, but with a lot more capability. And giving everybody access to that. So we just launched our freemium offering for the first time in the history of the company. This product's been around since 2017, so a little over 3 years old. And we just now have given all community members access to it for up to 50 users. And so we've just seen a fantastic reception over the past month that's been out here. We've seen close to 14,000 signups for our freemium product. Just in 4 weeks, right? And so we're very, very thrilled about the initial reception. And of course, like I mentioned previously, this is all, if you think about the underlying forces in the industry, you've got, everybody's moving to the cloud. People are trying to do a lot of great things with big data. People are trying to be more agile with DevOps and really sort of being very, very quick with what they're how they deploy code into production, all those sort of things, and getting more and more and getting faster. And then you've got the remote working environment, where everybody's now distributed in a hybrid or fully remote or whatnot. And that's there to stay, and it's not going away. So in that context, our solution really helps solve all of that, because you're really allowing developers to be super efficient and not being tapped on the shoulder to answer questions randomly from new people joining the company, et cetera. It's all documented in Stack Overflow for Teams. It's integrated with Microsoft Teams and Slack on the synchronous side. So you're able to, just really kind of memorialize and have evergreen knowledge. And people are able to really efficiently collaborate in a remote world to ultimately deliver on those macro objectives that CIOs and CTOs have set.
When you guys, think about how the market is moving, and especially now, what are some of the things that, you think would be driving?
Yeah, so I think, just in general, like I mentioned, remote work is here to stay in one form or fashion. Like there is, either companies are deciding right now. And it's hard to decide, including ourselves, by the way. We did a survey with our employees, and we're trying to determine. We have offices in New York and London and in Austin, Texas, and Munich, and we're determining what should be our model. And it's not entirely straightforward, because every country is different, every state is different, and so on. But we know for a fact that there's some element of remote work, either heavy or light, that's going to exist. So in that context, the world is going to be leveraging this model going forward, because there are obviously benefits. There are some downsides, like staring at a screen, and that causes a lot of burnout, for 12 hours a day. So how do you balance all of that to make sure it's sustainable? But what's clear is that with the tool set that people are going to be using, that's evolving very rapidly. So if you look at even companies like like Hopin, who are starting their own. The people are able to go on virtual conferences as a result, right? And those are examples of companies that have really sort of been able to, really make a bet on the fact that this is going to stay. That maybe you're not going to have 70,000 people crowded in a convention hall going forward, irrespective of how long it takes. So similarly for Stack Overflow, when we think about the world on collaboration, we think synchronous collaboration and asynchronous collaboration. And this addresses the point of burnout, because if you think about Microsoft Teams and Slack, what it really does well is we love those products. We use them at Stack Overflow, and all our customers use these products. But to effectively have real-time conversations or exchanges of information, they're opinion-based and they're quick and they integrate with video and all that, and that needs to happen, no doubt. But when developers and engineers, that can be a death knell for them to be sort of constantly being pinged on Slack, on Microsoft Teams, and being distracted from writing code, which is a very intensive process, and people do not like to be distracted, right? And so that's why Stack Overflow for Teams was created, and we've been using it for 12 years internally at Stack. And now in 2017 we launched it externally because customers were saying, hey, we love your private version of your public platform. That's exactly what we need, because it allows you to work asynchronously with your teammates in your company, and you're able to then say, you know what, here's a common question, here's the answer to a common question that keeps being asked. Because if you have thousands of employees and new freshers in India are joining, if they're all asking the same question, how do I get access to this technical information? And somebody has to answer it again on Slack or Microsoft Teams. Imagine the amount of stress that's causing when you add thousands and thousands of people. So why don't you just have memorialized evergreen knowledge, is always accurate technical information that provides the context for all the code that people are writing?
Yeah. Are there different scenarios or cases that you're imagining for this product? Because now that you're talking, one of the things I was thinking that it could also become a very strong knowledge repository kind of a product, right? And then also for media companies, it could be so relevant.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what it is, Shradha. So it's asynchronous collaboration and knowledge sharing. That's how we characterize it. So it's exactly what you described. So it's spot on. And the ability for us to collect all the most important information, and not us, as in like these are users doing it, right? And for them to have all that accessible so everybody in the company can use it. So if somebody's sitting in Delhi and somebody's sitting in Bangalore, they don't need to get on the phone to kind of exchange that information. All of it is just sort of pointing in a link in Stack Overflow Teams. Or it's, by the way, being fed into your Slack. So if you ask a question on Slack or Microsoft Teams, how do I do this on Amazon Web Services /Stack, as in Stack Overflow? The answer is going to come straight from Stack Overflow for Teams. It's coming from the knowledge repository, to use your words. Versus somebody answering a question and having to kind of respond and distracting themselves to do it, if that makes sense. And to your point around the use cases, most of what we do today, there are about 100 million technologists in the world, developers, software developers, cloud professionals, and so on. And that's the market we typically serve, and our use cases are focused on that, engineering teams, DevOps teams, software development teams, and so on. And then you've got knowledge workers outside of that. That's another 900 million folks around the world. And that's the next, and we see, about 20% of our use cases that fall in that category. So people that want to use it in a customer success capability, or even the finance and the legal organizations, places where you need to have knowledge that is accessible. So media companies, absolutely, right? And we're also exploring right now, how do we think about video content for Stack Overflow for Teams internally? Not necessarily to become a content management system, but how do we integrate into other tools that do that well, like Box and other places that do that well. So,
now that you're saying, I'm just thinking that with all the tech and the new world that we live in, which is like a digital world, still this has not been a solved problem, right? Like in companies and enterprises, still not solved. It's boarding someplace, somewhere. If you look at most organizations, and nobody knows where those knowledge banks are.
100%. That's spot on that, right? If you look at your own company, I'm sure you'll see, any company, right? Not specifically yours, but as any company, we've all been there when those wikis internally have been created with knowledge, and they're quickly out of date, very, very quickly. Especially when you think about technologists, and developers. Developers and technologists despise keeping wikis up to date, because it's basically where information goes to die, right? Like it's not going to thrive, as we say. And so that's why we exist, to make sure that problem, given the fact that developers and technologists use Stack Overflow so heavily in the public platform, it's a well-recognized format, the Q&A format, if you've tried it out. And that format and the love for that format being always accurate, always giving you the right answer, always being correct, is being extended now internally within companies, so you can get rid of your wikis and anything else, your kind of hodgepodge of documents floating around that are supposedly how people keep everybody on the same page.
Tell me, your journey, from your journey, if you have to look back and say, hey, these are some of the things I did right, and some of
Mm.
these things helped me to be where I am, what would those things be?
Yeah, I think that's it's a great question. Yeah, I'd say the couple of things come to mind, right? So for me, I've always believed couple let's say couple of high level points, and then I'll get to a specific point. So I think so I think the high level point is that I think it's very important to follow your intuition, and your intuition is your voice in your head that's sort of telling you, or in your heart rather, that's said to telling you to do certain things and to explore certain things. And I think as a young person, you're always trying to explore, like, what do I do? What is my purpose in life? And, all of us ask those questions, and many people don't figure out that answer for a long time. And we're all, by the way, on that journey. It's not entirely
Yeah.
clear along the way. However, I think following your intuition based on the way you were brought up, based on your surroundings, what you're exposed to, what your parents put in front of you, opportunities that you explored, and so on. It's important to do that. And for me personally, as it ties back into your question, I've always sort of believed, for whatever reason, it was because maybe it was as simple as my parents. I was heavily focused on cricket when I was growing up in India, right? So I was very focused on. I was a captain of my cricket team in high school. I was opening batsman, wicket keeper, and my mom always said, hey, you always should think about yourself always like a all rounder, as a well-rounded person. And that stuck with me as like, that's important, because I never believed,
Yeah.
and this is not right or wrong, by the way, that as in like different people have different styles. I personally, through my own upbringing, have always believed in having a well-rounded approach and having exposure to a lot of different things, to ultimately understand the world, how it works, right?
Yeah.
And be able to kind of keep things interesting, versus being super specialized in one area, right? And super deep. Nothing, again, it's amazing for people who do that because they're the world's best in that particular area. So for me personally, given the small example around cricket as an example, has guided me in a lot of ways, because a lot of what I've done in my education is following that intuition. So I said, I wanted to obviously study engineering, computer science, very important as the world becomes more digitized. Very exciting to go learn that. And then I explored working as a developer at a few companies when I was in university and so on. And then I realized, I was actually even more interested in how companies operated, and how do they, these technologies here. That's a whole part of the strategy. But how do all the pieces work? So that took me to kind of a broader frame, got into things like consulting, and then thought about strategy and finance. That took me to business school, took me to finance, and then it took me to I felt like I had like all the well-rounded elements of running something. And so that's what then I said I need the experience of actually leading large teams. So that's what took me to Rackspace, which is where I was for about 7 years before Stack Overflow. And that gave me, with some great mentors and leaders that I was fortunate to work under or work for. They gave me opportunities that basically allowed me to sort of pursue that passion / intuition. And so that then gave me an opportunity to kind of feel like I was operating with, multiple divisions of a company or multiple teams in a company to kind of go drive to a certain outcome. And that allowed me to then explore, I really feel passionate about high growth companies and companies that make a lot of impact. And so I think this journey of, following your intuition, always being curious, always searching for what excites you. Because, if you can find the intersection between what you're really good at, what really excites you, and what you're passionate about, what gets you going in the morning without even asking, and then finally, what the world really needs, right? And there's this concept, called ikigai in Japanese, in the Japanese culture that, explains this. And I'm totally a believer of that. If you can find that nexus, that intersection of those three, like the Venn diagram with those three circles, I think, you're in a good spot. And you can never find it perfect, because you're not going to, you can never just, life is not perfect. But if you can find that intersection, that's pretty awesome.
If you had to say one or two things that leads to building a strong community, what would that be?
Yeah, I think, community building is, it's not easy to do. Right.
Yeah.
So I think it takes a very specific set of conditions for that to sort of happen in a way that makes sense. And looking back at what Stack has done successfully, probably boil it down to a few, maybe three things. One is solving a common problem that impacts a lot of people, right? So you need some critical mass problem that a lot of people are going to benefit from. So when you think about software developers, I've got for for more, kind of like sentimental value, I've got all my, computer science textbooks in front of me. I've got my Perl textbook and C++ textbook. This is back in the day when that's how we learned how to do stuff.
Yeah.
But if you think about the problem of actually writing code can be very frustrating. It is, because, one error can keep you up for like hours. And I've been there, which is like, you're trying to debug something for literally hours, maybe days sometimes, and you just can't figure it out because it could be something very, very simple that you just didn't realize. So then the question becomes, okay, can we not unlock human potential by solving this problem by saying, listen, here's the problem that everybody's facing, and here's the answer. By the way, that's a silly mistake or whatever you want to call it, but here you go, solve it and go faster. Now you can go build the application. So that's a common problem. So I think that's a very important first start, which is to say, solve a problem that's of massive scale that a lot of people are impacted by, and where people can unify against that problem, right? And so that's important. So you got to discover that. Secondly, it's about making sure that the community is being built not by an external entity into the community. So the relationship between a company like Stack Overflow and our broader community, it's not like we can just say, do this and do that and do this and do that. It doesn't work. You have to say it's built by the community for the community. So you have to do it together along with the broader group, and you have to get representatives. And we've done that with our meta users and our power users, and now extending that to other newer users that are joining our platform. So very important that you partner, and it's not a sort of a dictatorial, sort of a dictate where you're basically saying, do this. That's very important because, again, we don't have all the answers. The community has the answers, right? So that's number two. And then number three is really creating an incentive system for people to keep doing what they're doing. So what is rewarding to them? Is it, as an example, we share when people answer a question on Stack Overflow amongst the 50 million questions and answers that we have. Any user can go and look at their answer and see how many people it impacted. So somebody can go and say, I answered that about 3 years ago, and they can see that 1.5 million people around the world access that. And that's amazing. It makes you feel great. Like all of us want to contribute to a lot of people in things much beyond ourselves. And that in itself is an incentive, especially for developers who are the most, the most benevolent and sharing folks who want to sort of, help out their fellow developers because they understand, the frustrating part of writing code. And that gives people an incentive to say, I'm helping people. And then they get recognition for it, points, badges, all those sort of things. And so that's an incentive system. So I would say those are the three sort of, points I'd make. And then of course, around that is this sort of virtuous cycle. The more of that you do, you're going to create this kind of, this loop that just keeps feeding on feeding. And that's why we're seeing our numbers sort of go up.
What is the purpose of whatever you do? What's the purpose that drives you?
Yeah. So our purpose as a company is defined by our mission statement, right? And our mission statement is helping write the script of the future by serving developers and technologists. And what that means is that our goal is we want to unlock the potential of developers and technologists to go faster and faster to create the next generation set of the software applications in the world that are powering the world. Every company is now a technology company, as we know, especially it's accelerating at just as a rocket ship, right? So the power of developers and to enable them to go faster is ultimately our mission. So whatever we do is either informally enabling them to learn about technologies, but that's directly enabling them to get access to knowledge and code and information that's going to help them solve their problem as they're writing their program, or is it helping them really collaborate very rapidly with their fellow developers and not get them distracted, memorializing information, et cetera, all those sort of things, and being part of that developer workflow and all the other technical tools. So those are all elements of that. And there's going to be so many more things we do over the coming years that are all focused on that subject. And that is, the company, I would say, purpose and why we're here, right? For me, my own purpose, comes from, ultimately, it's to really sort of create an impact for a lot of people. Like that's really what I want to do, And so I've generally gravitated towards things that unlocking value in high impact type of environments. So for me, it's like, I think Stack Overflow is a good example of this. It's a highly recognized in the developer ecosystem. We're sort of behind the scenes powering a lot of things. And at the same time, wanted a sustainable business model over time. So that speaks to the second point. But it creates a lot of impact. That's something that I want to be able to do in my life. And then secondly, want to create value for folks. So both those, I think, elements drive me on a daily basis.
Right now we're, in India, it's tough right now. What would you like to tell all the young people who are right now just struggling to keep their minds in order?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Shradha. And it is absolutely heartbreaking to see what's happening in India at the moment. Along with, of course, my own parents live in Bangalore, so I speak to them quite often to make sure they are, doing well. And it's most, beyond, of course, taking care. Health is absolutely number one, as we talk about in our company, right? That comes above and everything. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. So I think it's to really focus on that is super critical. So I hope all the young people in the world don't lose hope, especially in India, as they go through this challenge. I hope they really follow, the protocols of really getting vaccinated, wearing a mask, maintaining social distancing, because it's critical that we can solve this. It's well done. It's done around the world. So if people really follow that formula, I think there's going to be a significant opportunity to sort of beat this. And also mental health wise, if people are struggling, they should definitely reach out to people. It's historically been a stigma all around the world, but it is not a stigma. It is something that is very understandable given what's happening. And this is a very, very it is not normal to be locked up, the way we are, and so I think people should not feel shy about seeking help and making sure that, listen, everybody's going through it, and you're not alone. So just know that you're going to be well supported.
Thanks, Prashanth, and from all of us, whoever watching will agree with me. We're very proud to see you in the role that you are, and what a what a good conversation. Thank you. Thanks.
I appreciate that, Shradha. Thanks so much. It's my privilege to do what I do. And I really, again, wish you and wish everybody else in India all the best.